Good afternoon, everyone. We are coming to you this afternoon from Los Angeles, California, Hamilton, Bermuda, Washington, D.C., and awesome town, USA, yes, Newport, Rhode Island. Welcome to our 11th Challenger Lecture Series, presented by Hinckley Yachts and Hinckley Yacht Services and supported by 11th Hour Racing. This is our final Challenger Lecture Series of the season. And over this past winter and spring, we were able to engage in a variety of topics such as the Vendée Globe Race, diversity in sailing, America's Cup previews, and a great discussion of women in sailing. Tonight, in anticipation of Earth Day, we're delighted to host this very special Challenger Lecture Series. Our topic tonight is using green energy and sailing to restore ocean health. I want to acknowledge Dr. Charlie Shoemaker for being the inspiration for this evening lecture series. Charlie's been a great mentor to so many sailors in this community. It was fitting to name the series in his honor. As I said earlier, this is the final event of this Winter Challenger Lecture Series, and we're confident that the next one of these events will be in person in the 11th Hour Racing Great Room at Sail Newport starting next fall. So stay tuned to that. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Hinckley Yachts and Hinckley Yacht Services. While Hinckley builds mostly powerboats these days, Hinkley's proud of their sailing heritage dating back to 1928 and is delighted to be involved as a sponsor for this event. From sales of new and used boats to world-class service facilities around the country, Hinckley Yachts and Yacht Services has you covered. Learn more about Hinkley's product lines and yacht services offerings at hinkleyyachts.com. 11th Hour Racing, our supporting sponsor, 11th Hour Racing, works to mobilize sailing as well as maritime and coastal communities with an innovative approach to inspire solutions for the ocean. Driven by a philosophy of local solutions to global problems, the organization harnesses the power of sport through three primary areas of engagement. Sponsorships, number one, sponsorships such as the Imoca 60 11th Hour Racing Team, grants to nonprofits in categories such as ocean literacy and stewardship, clean technologies and best practices, and ecosystem restoration. And third, ambassadors. The 11th Hour Racing Ambassador Program is a community of marine industry professionals committed to ocean health. 11th Hour ambassadors such as Jamie Haynes, pictured here, represent many sections of the sport and all are respected leaders in the sailing industry. Thanks again to both Hinckley and 11th Hour Racing for their support of the Challenger Lecture Series. Now, tonight, in the spirit of sustainability, you, our audience, can help Sail Newport keep an older boat that we have in tip-top shape for our volunteers to manage our on the water and events and programs. Help us keep good old boats good. Every gift made in conjunction with tonight's event will directly support Sail Newport's much needed refurbishing of the motor vessel 5 Rings, a powerboat that's a workhorse in supporting our race and regatta programs. Refurbishing this boat aligns with Sail Newport's sustainability initiatives, as doing so extends the life of the boat. This boat is approximately 18 years old and was donated to us by Bill Belichick in 2017. Yes, that Bill Belichick. We're thrilled to keep the mighty 5 Rings going strong, and your support will help with the interior and exterior repairs, a new T-top to keep our volunteers out of the sun and rain, and the helm station and other repairs being replaced and repaired. 3 easy ways to give. Scan the QR code that you've seen on all these different slides, or you can hit the link in the chat or send a check to the annual fund, and in the memo, put in Challenger Lecture Series or 5 Rings. All donations are tax deductible, as Sail Newport is a 501c3 charitable organization. Now, before I get to the presentation and introduce our MC, our co-moderator, Danni Washington, if we left the raising of money for the 5 Rings to Jets fans, I'm pretty sure it would end up in the fiberglass chipper trying to recycle the boat. They would try to destroy it. So we want to make sure that everybody on our call tonight is able to maybe give us a few pennies and nickels to really support that important initiative. So tonight, our program is about the environment. It's about green energy and sailing and how we can restore our oceans. We're co-moderated tonight by Danni Washington. Danni is a seasoned TV personality, a science communicator, and an ocean explorer. She's over 10 years of science and media experience, and I'm thrilled to have Danni lead this important conversation on the environment tonight. Welcome, Danni.
Thank you so much, Brad. It is awesome to be here, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. Great to be back together again. I haven't seen you since our time, or my time, in Rhode Island last September during the Ocean Race Summit and the 11th hour homecoming event. So really grateful to be here. And I'm also thrilled to be co-moderating with you. This series is phenomenal, and I think that tonight's topic is fantastic. And we have a lineup of great speakers joining us as well. As many of you know, April 22nd, this Thursday, is Earth Day. And as we continue to work towards celebrating our planet, but also protecting our planet, we know that this year's theme for Earth Day is Restore Our Earth, which is definitely a call to action for all of us. And the Biden administration is planning to convene around 40 world leaders this week at the Global Climate Summit. And clean energy remains one of the top priorities that these leaders need to focus on. And Earth Week, for myself personally, is hands down one of the busiest weeks of the year. But I know for our first guest, this is also a very busy time for him as well, through his work on Capitol Hill. But before we jump into our introductions, I'd love to throw in 3 quick poll questions for our audience. We're going to pull them up on screen. If you can take 15 seconds to quickly answer these questions. The first question is, how does compost benefit the ocean? Second question, do you have renewable energy at home or on your boat? And the third question is, what are you hoping to learn during this webinar? So quickly put in your answers. We're going to show you the results right away, just to take the temperature of our listeners and where you all stand in regards to clean energy.
Well, I just have to say that I'm not allowed to vote on this, but I do have solar panels on our boat, which is just such an important aspect of long-range cruising, or even being able to have cold beverages in your refrigerator all the time. The new solar energy panels that are coming out these days are just so efficient. So,
when did you install them, Brad?
So I've had them on 2 different boats over the last 15 years, and I just put them on a couple of years ago. The flexible solar panels from Solbian, they're incredible. The amount of output you get for the dollar is tremendous.
That's excellent. I am still very much a newbie sailor. The last time I went out sailing and actually helping man the sailboat, it was a little dinghy that I was learning on in the Florida Keys. I'm a Floridian, and it's one of the best memories that I've ever made out on the ocean, hanging out with my friends from school and learning how to sail. It's one of the best memories. So one day I hope to have a sailboat or some type of vessel that I can take out at sea.
We'll get you on the water. Here we go.
Excellent. Okay. So first question we've got, let's see, 9% results with reduces methane and potent greenhouse gases. Okay, great. Awesome. And 35% said all of the above, which is correct. Renewable energy at home or in your boat. Most of us said not yet, but there is some intention there for home and boat, or both. And then what we're going to learn on this webinar, the biggest results came from sustainable developments in the ocean race. So that will be great to hear from Hilary a little bit later on regarding that. So thank you all so much for responding to that poll and submitting your answers. And now to the main event. Our first speaker is the co-founder of the Senate Ocean Caucus and senior member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. Rhode Island State Senator Sheldon Whitehouse has joined us, and he has been advocating for ocean and coastal research, restoration, and conservation during his 30 years of work in public service. An avid sailor and waterman, it's great to be in your company, Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Danni, and welcome back. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm so grateful you could spare some time to join us this evening in the middle of a really busy week. And I also wanted to preface that we met briefly in DC during Capitol Hill Ocean Week back in 2019, like super brief. You gave a speech and you kind of walked out, but I managed to just say a few words. So it's great to see you again. And I know that you were in the audience as well at the 11th hour racing homecoming event last year as well.
Yes. Big
Okay,
fan
so
of 11th hour racing and Sail Newport.
excellent, excellent. So I know our time is limited, so I definitely want to get right into our discussion. So first off, I really want to acknowledge what just happened in the last 30 minutes of our national news. A verdict just came out of Minnesota. Just wanted to touch that because I know that it's probably top of mind for many people who are listening in right now. Curious about your initial reactions and any messages that you'd like to share with us.
Well, it's always a somber thing when a verdict of that type comes down, and convictions for homicide are very serious. I was a U.S. attorney and attorney general and did a lot of that work. But I think this one was fair, and I think it was important. And I hope that people have confidence in it, and I hope that it becomes a turning point for a new conversation about police misconduct and police engagement with minority communities.
Yes, and as a Black woman, this is a really important day for me. So trying to stay focused right before we got on this call was definitely tough, but I'm so glad we're here because I think that when we speak about the environment, a lot of social justice issues go hand in hand with environmental justice issues.
Yeah.
And so by tackling this topic, I think we're going to make great strides toward some of the solutions that we need that could coincide with some of these other issues that we're dealing with in our society. So I'm hoping that this is, like you said, the beginning of a new chapter and allow us to actually move forward as a unified community and one nation.
Time.
Yes. So, okay, there are many big questions when it comes to ocean health, but where do we even begin? So we talk about plastic pollution, ocean acidification, pesticide runoff, sea level rise. I mean, the list keeps growing. And admittedly, a lot of these challenges I just listed can be traced back to our consumption of fossil fuels as an energy source. How is the implementation of clean energy a major catalyst for improving ocean health along the coast of Rhode Island and beyond? And can you describe a few clean energy options that you think are some of the most promising?
Yeah, the harms that come out of burning fossil fuels for the oceans are primarily to warm the oceans. They've absorbed about 90% of the excess heat that our carbon emissions have trapped in the environment. So we'd be in a really, really desperate situation if the ocean hadn't absorbed so much of the heat. But of course, when it absorbs all that heat, it warms and it rises and it changes fisheries and it changes the behavior of the ecosystem, and it can do a lot of damage to reefs. And then of course, as it rises, it creates hazards for states like Rhode Island that have a lot of coastline that's going to be submerged. And then of course, 30% of the CO2 itself gets absorbed by the oceans in a chemical reaction that makes the oceans more acidic. And so we're engaged in this experiment in how acidic we can make the oceans that really hasn't been ever happened before in the time of mankind. You have to go back into prehistoric geologic time to find examples. So it's really, really dangerous stuff that we're playing with. And the oceans have, on the one hand, really buttressed and spared us from a lot of our own folly, but they've also sustained a lot of damage as they've done so. And as Pope Francis said, you don't mess with Mother Nature. When you hit her, she'll hit you back.
That's a big fact. Yes, nature knows what she's doing, and there are systems in place for a reason. But because of our actions and our behaviors, we've seen a lot of these systems change, and not for the better. So, what are some of the most promising clean energy options that come to mind for you, just as a senator, as a citizen of Rhode Island?
Technologically, the biggest ones are going to be wind and solar, and the prices of both wind and solar are falling dramatically. In the wind department, we're particularly excited about offshore wind because Rhode Island solved the siting problem that had completely bedeviled every other state and prevented there from being any offshore wind in the US waters. And we turned the key, opened the door, and now there is as much as 30 gigawatts of offshore wind that is coming into the Atlantic. And that's going to have a very pronounced effect on our clean energy future.
Absolutely. And I know that a lot of folks are still grappling with the basic idea that we could power our country with clean, renewable energy resources. But the work that you're doing in Washington, you've already begun to lay the groundwork to facilitate the clean energy transition that we actually need. And at the end of 2020, you took a leading role in supporting the expansion and modernization of the nation's electric transmission infrastructure, the grid, by endorsing the Advanced Energy Technologies and Grid Efficiency Act of 2020. My question is, why is infrastructure such an important aspect of the transition to clean energy?
Well, if we're going to succeed at moving to wind and solar, then we've got to make sure that we're developing wind and solar where it's best to develop it, which is where the wind is, where the sun is shining, and where there aren't a whole lot of competing uses, where it's the most valuable thing to do. And that isn't where the old coal plants and the old oil burners are. So you've got to reboot the utility grid in order to reach those new areas. You also have to make them deal with the fact that a lot of this power is intermittent. Solar goes down at night. And there are lots of ways to deal with that. And the grid operators have done a very good job, but that's a constant challenge as renewables become a bigger part of the grid. And one of the exciting things about the Biden new infrastructure bill, the Build Back Better bill, is how much it focuses on the grid and bringing it up to date and up to speed so that we are operating with a high performance modern grid as we move to these high performance modern technologies.
Senator, on that topic, while we're trying to do things to combat climate change, we're living with climate change. And can you talk about that infrastructure and the kind of smart grid technology that could have been used in that disaster that happened in Texas with the cold snap, which we all know it has something to do with climate change, but we have to live with this, and talk about that infrastructure.
Texas is its own environment, politically and culturally. And in order to avoid federal regulation, they ran a grid that was separated from the rest of the national grid. So if something like this had happened in Rhode Island and our resources had been pulled down, we would simply reach to other resources and electrons would be trafficked in and nobody in Rhode Island would even notice that it happened. When the Texas grid went down, primarily because of fossil fuel plants being unable to cope in the very cold weather, they didn't have any place to turn. And so to save the grid, they had to shut down the power, first turn it down and then turn it off and stage it going on and off. Texans aren't used to that kind of weather. They don't have the right clothes, they don't have the right insulation, they don't have the right vehicles, they don't know what to do. And so dealing in a powerless environment in freezing temperatures, that's unpleasant enough up in New England where we're hardy and know how to do it. For Texas, it was unfamiliar as well and really frightening.
Yeah, especially for marginalized communities that had no access to any type of energy resource or alternatives. And that is a big, big deal when it comes to dealing with energy distribution and how we're seeing so many communities miss out on this opportunity to be a part of a better grid, a smarter grid. But one question, this is just my own personal clarification. You said the Build Back Better bill that's proposed by President Biden, but there's also the American Jobs Plan. Can you clarify for me, Senator? Same thing. Okay,
Same thing.
Just making sure. Good.
Yeah, it's called the Jobs Bill. It's called the Build Back Better bill. It's called the Innovation Bill. It's got a lot of names.
I've always
called it Build Back Better.
Build Back Better. I like it. Triple B. Okay. So what portion of that plan directly addresses ocean health in Rhode Island and also, of course, citizens of Rhode Island?
Not enough. That's a place where I'm going to be busy. I'm already talking to other coastal senators to make sure that when the bill comes through the Senate, we're able to develop a concerted, agreed set of improvements to the bill. Here's an obvious one. We're about to be building an awful lot of offshore wind. If we were building oil and gas, then the revenues from that would go in part to the states and in part to conservation and in part to the federal government. Because it's offshore wind and we haven't updated the law, no revenues go to the states, no revenues go to conservation. So that's a very, very simple fix, and it's one that we're going to work very hard to get into the bill. I think we'll succeed.
I definitely hope so. And also in terms of the bill, there's a portion that describes the Civilian Climate Corps. And it seems like that might be the most tangible way for citizens to get involved, like hands-on with fighting climate change by protecting diversity, restoring coastal ecosystems, and reforestation. And it's going to cost about $10 billion in investment from the government to make that happen. And a lot of people are comparing it to Franklin D. Roosevelt's Civilian Conservation Corps, which was built into the New Deal. So how do you foresee this particular effort being implemented locally, again, in Rhode Island? And what areas of direct climate action would you consider a priority in Rhode Island?
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be a lot of work for, I hope a lot of young people, and a chance for people to come from all around the country and get together and go out and work together and have the combined social experience of working together on a plan with people who are different than you, a little bit the way the World War II generation all went off to serve together and came back changed by that experience. I think in Rhode Island, a lot of the work is going to be around our coasts, because that's where a lot of the danger is. And I think a lot of the work around our coast is going to be around green coastal defenses, so that you're rebuilding salt marshes, you're packing the edges of creeks with oyster shells to protect against boat wakes and the degradation of the edges. This is a lot of the work that is actually being done already by groups like the Nature Conservancy and Save the Bay. But with this kind of resources behind it, you can really put a lot of hands-on. And some of this, you can pave a road with a machine, but if you're replanting a sea marsh, it's kind of got to be done by hand. And so a lot of this is real hands-on work, and to get young people out doing it, appreciating nature, appreciating the hazard to our coasts that we're experiencing, I think it's going to be a big plus.
I absolutely agree. I think, my own work in Florida, we focus on empowering and engaging with young people who love the ocean and want to get involved in any way that they can. And we use science and art to help uplift that opportunity. But of course, hands-on opportunities like working in this, in this type of core would give kids an opportunity to just connect with nature. And I think that's really the missing link that we've seen in the environmental movement, is this lack of connection for various reasons. Everyone has a different, lifestyle, different lived experience, different access. But if we can create more opportunities for individuals to connect with nature, I think we're going to be way better off.
Yeah, when a kid in Rhode Island doesn't have the experience of being at the seashore, something's gone wrong.
Yes,
absolutely.
And I definitely acknowledge, organizations like Sail Newport, who are providing this type of access for young people through sailing. And so, Brad, I don't know if you want to quickly just touch on some of the cool youth programming that you've been working on.
Yeah, well, we've had a very fortunate experience to get involved with working with the local public schools, putting a science and sailing curriculum into the public schools, into fourth grade. In second grade, all the students in our Newport public school system learn to swim. And by the time they're in fourth grade, they have a science and sailing program for 16 weeks during the year. That is supported by 11th Hour Racing, of course. But I also like to acknowledge some of the other educational programs we have in the state, and that's URI. University of Rhode Island, the ocean engineering program that both my daughter and my son have graduated from or about to graduate from. They are doing this work exactly what the senator just said about how coastal fortification, all sorts of different, combating sea level rise, all sorts of different civil projects. So, I think it starts at the early ages, but certainly Rhode Island is leading with our universities, Brown, URI, and others, Community College of Rhode Island. So we're really fortunate to have our eye on the ball on this.
Yeah, glad to see it, Brad. And thank you for that work. I think it requires all of us to step up and be involved with programs like this, and to think locally act locally, think globally. That is correct. So swinging back to Senator Whitehouse. So can you share a little bit more about the positive changes that you've witnessed on Capitol Hill. I know it's been a crazy time, but since we've transitioned to the new administration, have you seen any forward movement that you're, besides this bill that we just spoke about, working toward better climate action and ocean health? And I know that so many citizens are concerned because the state of our government has been so polarized, and it's really impeding our success of certain environmental legislation. So what are some positive stories you can share, maybe some experiences that you've had on the Hill?
It has been a complete 180. From trying to figure out how we could find something that we could get done to trying to figure out how much we can get done. And the Build Back Better bill is going to be really important for that. There are a lot of regulatory decisions that are being made by the new Biden administration that are deeply swiveled towards climate protection and environmental protection. The personnel are just really powerfully interested in climate and environmental issues. Our international footprint has changed dramatically. John Kerry just went and reopened China to climate agreements. And we've got Glasgow coming up, the Paris Agreement, you know, it's going to be bigger and better than the Paris Agreement in November. And really, wherever you look, whole of government, you see a complete reversal of direction back in the direction that we need to go in, and a lot of energy and talent behind that direction shift. So it's a really, really positive time on climate to be in my line of work. And we just need to damn sure make sure we get it done.
Yes, yes.
No
and how
excuses.
can, no excuses, no excuses.
No
Do you have
excuses.
any calls to action for our audience to maybe get involved to help support your work?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to help, but you know, making sure that you're communicating your concern about this, supporting scientists and the work that they've done now that we're listening to them again in government, and working through these organizations that are so important, like the Nature Conservancy, like Save the Bay, like Clean Water Action, who really bring the power of the public into these discussions. So there's an enormous amount that people can do and must do.
Yes. And what about the Senate Ocean Caucus? Any other updates there?
Yeah, we're doing actually really well. It's been a hidden success, even during Trump years, believe it or not. We've gotten a lot done.
It's truly bipartisan, isn't it?
Yeah, everything we do, not only is everything we do bipartisan, it's almost entirely by unanimous consent, which means we got to get 100 people agreed. So we did 4 fishing treaties. We did the whole pirate fishing enabling legislation. We've done 2 ocean plastics bills, the first to test the proposition that we could, and the second that really powered it up. And now the Biden administration is moving in with the ability to implement those bills in ways that the Trump administration wasn't. So all of that is exciting. And then there's some really big bills coming down the pike. We've got one on the blue, basically how you use the oceans to help climate change by getting carbon dioxide out of the water and out of the air. We've got a big ocean science bill and a couple of other strays, and we're hoping that we can actually turn them into what we call the big blue bill and get basically the biggest piece of ocean legislation passed since NOAA was established, done in this Congress.
Wow, the big blue bill. I love that. My organization in Miami is called Big Blue and You.
Yeah.
We've been around for 12 years. It's great.
This will be your bill then.
Sounds like a trademark. Sounds like a trademark infringement, Danny. I'd go after.
No way.
Yeah,
that would be hilarious.
It's a time for a lot of optimism, and it's a time for a lot of ambition. And it's a time to see this not as just a continued point in an array of points, but as a pivot point in our history where we move to a different view of what our country should be and what our government should be.
Yes, envisioning the future is key, I think, to this movement. That as we move toward a just and regenerative and sustainable world, we need people to see the vision. So speaking of vision, Senator Whitehouse, what's your vision for Rhode Island and our nation? I know it's a big question, but what do you hope for in the future of your ocean state? And what role do you see the sailing community playing into this vision?
Well, the sailing community has a really important role because so many people, so many Americans are terrestrial. Not many people have the chance to get out on the water, and very few have the chance to go any distance, to go seriously offshore. It's rare to find a place like Newport where people who have sailed all around the world in highly competitive races all come together and share their experience. And when the experience is, we had to stop in the middle of the South Atlantic to do an emergency dive over the side of the boat to clear waste plastic that was fouling our keel, and there wasn't an island around for 500 miles, that's a really telling fact about how bad ocean plastic has got. So for the sailing community to bear witness to what's going on out there is incredibly important. And also because a lot of people in the sailing community have a lot of resources, to dedicate their resources to protecting the ocean that they love is also important too. But my vision is that we're able to turn the corner. We're able to get back under 1.5 degrees of warming. The oceans again are clean and safe, and America is no longer embarrassed by its conduct in environmental legislation, that we have re-earned the greatest generation appellation that our fathers and grandfathers earned by the way we've conducted ourselves in this decade.
Thank you so much, Senator Whitehouse. And in terms of that plastic pollution issue, I want to just quickly plug, there is a great documentary that just released this week on Discovery Plus called The Swim. And it's featuring a swimmer named Ben LeConte who did a Atlantic crossing swimming back in the 90s. And then he went and attempted to swim across the Pacific recently. And so the documentary's there and it's available. So if you have in your ample spare time, have time to check that out, I would highly recommend it. But thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, and really can't thank you enough. This is an important conversation, an important space, and I think that it's a launching pad for something new. Like you said, we're going to pivot to what's next. I know you have to run to another meeting, so feel free to hop off whenever you're ready. But again, thank you so much.
Brad, thank you. Danny, thank you so much. Always great to see you. And once again, bravo to Sail Newport and 11th Hour Racing for all the amazing stuff they do.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Awesome. That was fun.
Was great, Danny. Wonderful job. I mean, you got some stuff out of him that I don't think that I could have for sure. But it was great to hear him talk about sailors. And this is a great segue into our next two guests about what sailors can do as those canaries in the coal mine, if you will, to be able to showcase what we're seeing on the oceans. And I'll let you introduce our next two guests, but this is a perfect segue.
Yes, let's keep the party going. So first off, we have Hilary Kotoun, who is the Strategic Communications Manager at 11th Hour Racing, and Tom Burnham, who is an elite sailor and an 11th Hour Racing ambassador, who's connecting with us all the way from Bermuda. So welcome, Hilary and Tom. So grateful to have you here. I think it would be great to kick off just to give people a little synopsis of what you're up to these days and your work with 11th Hour Racing, and then we can jump into questions. So let's start off with Hilary.
Thanks, Danny. I have to say I loved hearing the Senator's vision for a future healthy ocean. It's sometimes when we talk about the environment, we so often talk about the problems, and hearing a vision for what our future can be with a clean and healthy ocean is really inspiring to get back to work. So at 11th Hour Racing, I'm our strategic communications manager, as you said, and a lot of my work is trying to take some of the more difficult and complex issues and hopefully the amazing solutions that are out there to them and turn them into a social media post or a blog post, or and bring our grantees and sponsorships and ambassadors together for stories to inspire people.
Beautiful. Thanks, Hilary. Tom, what about you?
Yeah, so as an 11th Hour Racing ambassador, I'm a professional sailor, professional sailing coach, and just sort of out on the circuit trying to help some people get around the race course, and using the 11th Hour Racing ambassadorship. My my objective there is to help use some of my influence on the events and the organizations that I work with to work with sustainability and try and raise the sustainability the initiatives around the world and the different events that we go to. And yeah, I'm here in Bermuda this week with the Sail GP Australian team, coaching the Australians and in Bermuda. And Sail GP is doing a really good job with a lot of the initiatives here, so that's exciting. And then also this TP52 Super Series over in Europe, which is supported by 11th Hour Racing, is another group that I work with quite often, and I've done a lot of good things in sustainability.
Very cool. Really appreciate you being here. I know you're in the midst of a lot of things going on where you are.
Yeah, there's a boat being worked on right out inside of the container door I'm sitting at right now. We just got in from sailing this afternoon.
Excellent. Well, we're glad you're here for sure. So my first question is for Hilary. One of our poll questions earlier at the top of the webinar was about composting and the benefits that come with that for the ocean. So can you dive into some of the reasons why this is an important action that can positively contribute to ocean health and how 11th Hour Racing has supported composting efforts in Rhode Island?
Yeah, well, I was really happy to see that most of the audience knew the right answer. I guess maybe our communications about how compost helps the ocean are working.
Yes.
But it's, I'm a huge fan of composting, and I talk about it a lot because it's so easy. So many of us at home are already separating our trash and our recycling, and it's just one more step. You take the compost, put it into its own pile, your food scraps, and it helps your trash not smell bad. You don't have to take out the trash as often, and so it's very simple. It also has 3 major benefits for human and ocean health. So of course, the food waste, if it goes to the landfill, it creates methane, and that's a potent greenhouse gas. And by not sending your food scraps to the landfill, you avoid that. When the food scraps go into compost instead, it helps sequester carbon into the soil, reducing the carbon in the atmosphere. And then, of course, one that's great for Rhode Island is once the compost has matured and the nutrient-rich dirt is used instead of fertilizer in our gardens and on our grass, then we don't have to use chemical fertilizers. And that often runs off into our local waterways and create algal blooms. And that way we can have some nice water to swim in and, protect Second Beach, keep the water quality high there. So in Rhode Island specifically, 11th Hour Racing is supporting 2 awesome initiatives. We have Healthy Soils, Healthy Seas Rhode Island and Groundworks Rhode Island, and both enable individuals to do composting. And there's quite a few options to make it easy. My personal favorite, I separate out my food scraps, I put them in a bucket, and I take it to the drop-off point once a week, or I make my husband do it. And, I don't have to deal with the food scraps. And then once a year, they give me some soil that I can put in my garden. They also do schools and restaurants and businesses. And then Groundworks RI is also working on teaching people how to use that compost in their garden. And they have some awesome webinars this week.
And just so
Excellent.
everyone knows, Emily is putting those links to those different organizations right in the chat. So you can go right to their pages while we're talking about it.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, for myself, I live in an apartment, and a lot of folks who live in an apartment or condo have to deal with, how do I get my compost going if I don't have a balcony, if I don't have an outdoor space? It seems kind of impossible, but there are some simple solutions that I've researched, one being a basic composting pan with like a carbon filter, so it prevents the smell of any type of decomposing food. But I recently found this device called a food cycler, which is it's basically drying out food scraps and creating and pulverizing it into a powder that can then be easily added to a compost pile or added to even the soil outside or grass. And I haven't used it yet. I'm really excited to. I just got it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what solution, or if this is the right solution for me as an apartment dweller. So I'm always curious about new devices, new techniques, new things that we can do depending on our living situation. So Hilary, I was just curious, do you have any other insight on how to compost even better?
I was gonna say I must be targeted on Instagram because I keep getting the ads for that. I don't need one yet, although I want to try it. My trick is putting a paper bag in the bin to kind of keep things from getting too gross. I know a lot of people put it in the freezer, and then when they take it at the end of the week, you just empty out the freezer and you have no smell to deal with whatsoever.
Yeah, that's how Emily's been working with Healthy Soils, Healthy Seas RI. We've been working with them for about a year and a half now, since after the last Volvo, I guess. And that's how we do it. We throw it in the freezer. It seems to work.
Yeah.
Nice. Any tips and tricks that work, let's use them. So on the topic of composting, I want to move on to Tom, and as an 11th Hour Racing ambassador, you're included in a cohort of marine industry professionals that are all committed to ocean health. So what are some of the programs or initiatives related, or within the sailing industry that point toward this type of positive progress for the ocean, and also composting programs as well?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I was so happy about I guess it's 2 summers ago, 2019 summer, when we were doing the Super Series over in Europe, the 52 Super Series. The initiatives, one of the initiatives I thought was really great was at each event, there was a local charity that was able to, that was identified to receive sort of leftover food, because a lot of times on these big teams, there might be a few sandwiches left over, a couple of bowls of pasta or something like that. And every day that charity would stop by the boats and pick up some of these foods and be able to distribute them to needy people in the town that we were visiting and sailing in. And then the other part was the composting piece. And there was a composting identified at every location as well, so that we could compost any food scraps and things to reduce the waste that we were producing on the water and through the process of provisioning the crews and keeping the athletes fed. So I think that's a pretty neat thing. It's the same thing happening here in Bermuda this week at SailGP, where we have a special bin for food scraps. For after every meal, we can put our food scraps in it and really try and reduce the amount of waste that we send to the landfill, especially in a place like Bermuda. That's such a tiny little island. With the infrastructure here is very different than in the United States. So it's an interesting one. It's exactly the same landmass, Brad, as Aquidneck Island here in Bermuda. So it's as a whole country, as the size of Aquidneck Island, it's pretty impressive out in the middle of the ocean.
Right. I think, Brad, you had a question you wanted to add in there?
I have a couple questions from the Q&A. Now, Tom, so Tom, you go around the world and you compete on a lot of different programs, coaching a lot of different programs, and you've really had an impact on this series as the organizers are organizing these series. The question from the chat was, what actions are the top sailing leagues taking to reduce the pollution involved with transporting equipment between events?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's definitely a real push to try and reduce that. Some circuits are reducing it by just not moving as much. Like there's a big push for the Marstrom 32 class, for instance. They basically go to Miami for the whole winter and Newport for the whole summer in the United States. So they don't move around the country and do a million different events in different spots. So there's a big push there. I know SailGP is working really hard with some partnerships in the shipping industry to try and be really efficient with the shipping routes and containerizing everything. That's one thing. Like this tour, everything on this entire SailGP circuit is all containerized. So there's nothing that has to be external of a container, which is a bulk item that takes up a lot more space on a ship. So it's a little bit more efficient that way. I mean, it's hard to get around it completely, obviously, when we want to be in different cool locations for our events and showcase what we're doing. But there's definitely mindfulness about it at the moment, and looking towards solutions that make it better. So these circuits are trying, that's for sure.
So we're going to get into the ocean race in a minute. Danny has a question for Hilary. One more for you, Tom. A huge amount of boat cleaning products, compounds, sealants, etc., are terrible for the environment. How can we maintain a boat while minimizing our impact on the environment?
Yeah, this is a really good one too, and another one where the Super Series, it's particularly, and now SailGP as well, are having the same initiative where it's written in the rules of the series where you can't use any products that are not good. They're not ocean safe. So we can't clean the boats with Clorox or whatever. We have to use ocean safe soaps and cleaning products in all Sail GP and all the TP52 Super Series. So these circuits are mandating these things now. And I think that's a really big thing that we can, as ambassadors, can help push for, because we do have that influence to be able to do that. And I know that you do the same things at Sail Newport with your events, where you mandate reusable water bottles, and we can start to change things from the inside a bit now, which is really great.
And maybe there's a question for Hilary. Is there a place within 11th Hour Racing, or maybe your former organization you work for, Sailors for the Sea, where all of these different cleaning, the good green ones are kept? Is there like a toolkit, for example?
Yeah, so I know the 52 Super Series and the 11th Hour Racing team are working with EcoWorks Marine. So that's a great product line that I know the team did a lot of research into it to make sure they were happy with how it works. And then Sailors for the Sea does have a green boating guide, or at least they did. I haven't checked on it in a while, but I'm pretty sure they still use it. And that's a really helpful resource too.
Thank you. And thank you to Andrew and Zoe for those two great questions. And we'll get into more questions later.
Yes, those are fantastic questions. So Hilary, going back to you, we're preparing for the ocean race kicking off in 2022. So exciting. Tell us about the ocean race and their commitment to clean energy, and not just in terms of the sailing teams, but also at the stopovers.
Yeah, so we're really excited for the ocean race. And one of the big initiatives directly to renewable energy is that they're aiming to have 100% renewable energy at all the stopovers. Obviously, that's a big undertaking, and the good news, Sail Newport has a head start with the solar panels on their roof, but they'll be working with the stopovers to see what's possible through renewable energy credits and seeing how they can achieve that goal. So that is very exciting. And then specific to the teams in their notice of race, the ocean race is requiring that 20% of renewable energy be made on the 65. So that's while they're out at sea, all the energy they use, 20% has to come from a renewable source. And on the IMOCAs, it's 30%. And it may not sound huge as 100% on land, but it is a big step forward, and this hasn't been done before. And so, of course, our team, the 11th Hour Racing team, is looking at this as an exciting challenge, because the less diesel fuel you can have on board, the lighter your boat may be. So how can you do better than the 30%? And that way you're only bringing a minimum amount of diesel. Obviously, we're going to require teams bring some for safety issues. But how can the team kind of find the best advantage in order to create as much renewable energy as possible and convert that efficiently to their systems, so that when the time comes, they'll be using even less diesel fuel.
So to add to that question on the sailing team aspect, and yes, we are. It's nice to know that we're going to do the renewable energy. That's new information for us. Glad to know. We're halfway there, I think. I think we're more than halfway. So maybe this is a tag team question, but for both Hilary and Tom. Boats are being made out of carbon fiber, and there's been a lot of work. I know North Sails and Quantum Sails have both worked at how to recycle some of the carbon elements of older boats. There's certainly recycling of fiberglass boats that's going on. There's a test up here in Rhode Island that they're doing, but what's the status of recycling some of the materials that boats are made of?
I can speak to the team a little bit, and then Tom, of course, please chime in. I'm not an expert in this topic, but recycling carbon fiber is hard, and obviously you have to get the resins out of the carbon fiber in order to do something with it. And so the team is working on a project with a broken boat piece, and to see how that will work. And of course, you have to measure the impact of the energy intensity to remove these resins and heat it up. And then is that better than using new carbon fiber and resins? So they're tracking all that to get a better understanding. And I don't have the results yet because they're still working on it. And I know they're going to be capturing quite a bit of beautiful or interesting, maybe video on it, but that will be coming out sometime this summer, probably, with some results and some video on that topic.
I think to add to that one, I think the important thing that, you know, in the mandating of rules and things for regulations for events, 11th Hour Racing did a really good job with in this last America's Cup of trying to of making the molds for the America's Cup boats. They had to be recyclable, and that was part of the rule for the event in the America's Cup. So that's something that hasn't been talked much about in the stories about around the America's Cup, but I'm sure that was part of the initiative that came out of the Bermuda America's Cup and the sponsorship 11th Hour Racing had with one of the teams there.
Yeah, and Tom, on that issue as well, and in regard to the America's Cup, I know that there was a sustainability charter that went along with that, right? And it tackles issues, different things, specifically water bottles on board boats. I think that was a part of it. You know, in the US alone, we use over 50 billion water bottles every single year. And that is just massive, staggering numbers when you think about it. But what are some of the top suggestions that you have for sailing teams, clubs, and actual individual sailors if they want to get actively involved in sustainability? Like, give us a well-rounded list of some startup ideas to get in the door, and then maybe some ideas for those who are a little bit more seasoned.
Yeah, I think just getting started in getting a team to become more sustainable, it's definitely a little bit of, there's some hesitancy sometimes on people in the team. Sorry about that. That's a little bit of footwork happening around here still. A little bit of hesitancy sometimes, and pushing people into making sure that they think about the sustainability. You know, in the 52s, it started when I was sailing on the Quantum Racing team. Must have been around 10 years ago now, where we really started pushing like the reusable water bottles. And it was a small thing that led the team to start thinking about more and more things. And I guess the big thing that I want to say is that it's not as hard as it seems like it is going to be when you want to make steps towards being more sustainable. I think it's a big jump to begin with, but there are a lot of toolboxes. There's a lot of information available on the 52 Super Series website about how to make your team more sustainable, with the 11th Hour Racing team for around the world race, how they've done what they've done. And it's not as daunting a task as people think it is. Even here in Sail GP, we all take care of our own water bottles. We just have to make sure that everything is, you know, labeled well, so you're not drinking out of your buddy's water bottle or whatever. But, you know, it's not that daunting. You can do a lot better with your packaging of your lunches and not have things in plastic containers. And it's really pretty cool when you come off the water at the end of the day and you don't have any garbage, basically, and you just have some food scraps that might go in the composting. It's a really nice feeling, and it helps you. I feel like it helped me move towards being better in my entire life, because it really just made you think about, be more thoughtful about how you go through your day, you know, and how you work sustainably in your whole life. But I don't think it's as daunting a task as it seems like at first if you're just getting into it.
Yes, I mean, every bit helps, every action, every choice, it really does matter. And what we want to avoid, obviously, is having people feel overwhelmed, which then leads to apathy. And mitigating that apathy is of the utmost importance at this juncture. And I'm just excited to see what other, you know, I guess epiphanies people will have and sailing teams will be able to experience by just choosing a few different options. I think that's such a great way to get started. And so when it comes to individual action, Hilary, do you have any suggestions for our audience watching, like on how they can get involved with 11th Hour Racing's sustainability efforts locally? And what are some of the individual actions that we can all take to improve ocean health?
Yeah, great question. So this is when I love to give a shout out to some of our grantees. We support over 30 organizations, and they all do a lot of amazing work on the ground and are often looking for volunteers. So here in Rhode Island, of course, we have Sail Newport, and I can let Brad plug what volunteers they're working for. But also Save the Bay is a great organization that everybody's familiar with, and they've made things safe so that you can social distance and still get out in nature. And the senator was talking about planting seagrass before. Restoring salt marshes is a big project of theirs, and that's something you can volunteer to do with them. Another one of my favorites that's been happening during COVID is a lot of teenagers have started to mark drains, and with the stencils, letting people know they lead to the ocean to try and prevent dumping, which still unfortunately happens. And we are the ocean states, but a lot of times people don't think that this drain actually leads to the ocean without some kind of filter, and they do. And then, another local favorite is Clean Ocean Access, and they've modified their monthly beach cleanups to allow people to do them in groups and so with, like in your bubble and social distance. Or they have a water sampling program that is really important as we head into summer, and that helps track water quality all over Aquidneck Island.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Hilary. Yeah, that sounds exciting. And that's just in Rhode Island. I mean, you go across the country and you look at all these different organizations that are doing great work. It's just up to us as individuals to decide how we're going to support them and how we'll get involved. It, like I said earlier, it requires everybody to step up and to be a part of this. So last question for Tom. So what are your thoughts, kind of circling back to clean energy? What are some alternative energy sources for boaters and sailors that you've been noticing recently?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a push for electric boats, which I think is really exciting. There's a group that I worked with in the last America's Cup, Artemis Racing, who started this Artemis Technologies, and they're really working on electric foiling ferries and container ships for, getting diesel and fossil fuels out of the shipping and moving people industry, and mostly in moving people at the moment. So that's a really exciting area that I think people are working towards. I know that there's another push with there's a boat in Narragansett Bay that's a foiling electric power boat, a small power boat. So there's a lot of pushes for that. Even in Sail GP here, one of the initiatives with Sail GP at the moment is that in 2025, they're committing to have all the support boats on the water not be run with any fossil fuels. So that's pretty exciting. I'd be interested to see how we get to that point, but the fact that there's a push happening is going to be great. And there's already been trials of chase boats for chasing these boats around that are run purely electrically. And then even here, these boats, the sailboats, have batteries in them to run hydraulic pumps for some of the systems in the boat. And just across from the compound where I'm sitting in now is a container with a array of solar panels on the roof that charge those batteries. So it's a pretty a nice system to try and make it a little powered by nature, is one of the slogans here. But there's definitely a push, more and more electric motors, more and more efficiency with batteries and things to help us get around the race course without fossil fuels.
Very nice. I love that. Powered by nature. That should official hashtag.
And that was one of the questions, Danny, that was in the Q&A was about the alternative propulsion options that are being developed. And one of the ones that caught my eye is these hydrogen fuel cells. Obviously, they've come a long way, and they've got a long way to go. I know Siemens, which is a giant global conglomerate, is pretty full on in developing marine engines. I know that 11th Hour Racing has just invested in a rib with an electric outboard. Hilary, do you know anything? Can you tell us anything about that?
Is that the one up on East Bay Sailing Foundation?
Oh yeah, they got one too.
Yeah, so they developed a power cat that can have a torpedo on it and go fast enough to keep up with junior sailing boats, hopefully. So another one of our ambassadors, John Mollicone, has been working with them on that to see how that will work for junior sailing.
Perfect.
Excellent. Brad, what do you say? Should we move on to audience questions, Q&A?
Yeah, I've been kind of pulling them in as we go, Danny. So I think, I think we have a couple more. I think we answered that one. Hilary from Michael DiLorenzo. Do we know anything from Damian Foxall yet about the environmental costs of building the high-tech boats for the ocean race? I think you touched on that briefly. Anything to add there?
Yeah, well, the team was able to use a beta version of Marine Ship 360. And so it's a life cycle assessment. So before they even began building the AMOCA, they looked at its impact. And one of the biggest improvements they were able to make before building the boat was to ensure the manufacturers were using renewable energy. And so when they laid everything out and looked at the impact of it, they found that was going to be one of the biggest improvements they could make. So the boat will get launched in July, but they were able to do that before building it.
Fantastic. Danny, this one might be for you. From Hannah Sweat, is there a place for hyper-local power grids, like house-to-house grids, in our future?
That's a great question. I have no idea, to be quite honest. The reason being, it's just when you look at infrastructure and for clean energy, to be able to power our communities, it's very nuanced based on the municipality and the state and so on. So I don't have any particular answers to that question yet, but definitely want to research that. I think we're going to have a lot of answers in the coming months.
And you know, we were mentioning circular economies, and I think Danny, you had a great question earlier, or that I read in one of the documents. Why don't you go into that one?
Yeah, well, you know, circular economy is a buzzword or buzz term that's been floating around in the sustainability world, as well as, you know, any type of environmental consciousness, because we're looking at how we're going to transform our current economy, which is a capitalistic system, into a circular one that allows for those who are producing products and selling goods will have a cradle to cradle perspective. Well, they're looking at the materials that they're making and what they're putting out in the world, and considering and paying for and making sure that those materials end up back with them again, so that we don't see this massive influx of waste. I think that, you know, just the ideology behind having so much stuff, that we have to move toward thinking a little bit differently and looking at how we can minimize the amount of stuff in our life. Do we really need to buy those things? Is it super necessary in our lifestyle? All of those questions, you know, each person has to ask themselves. And I think a circular economy is extremely exciting because it puts the responsibility back on corporations and companies, which it should have been, I think, from the beginning, instead of putting so much pressure on the consumer and, you know, a lot of the guilt. So
as a consumer, the base circular economy thing we can do is composting. You know, Kim Ferguson asked a very important question. She's seeing more and more chemicals used on this lawn signs on Jamestown Island, right here, Connecticut Island next door. And, you know, just, we got to use less chemicals in our lives. And that's a key component of this. So
we're continually voting with our dollars. Whenever we go to the store, we're making these choices that are either improving or hurting our environment. And so we have to just put that on ourselves to handle, right? But at the same time, allow for people who are manufacturing goods to also take that into consideration. So it's going to take both parties to be involved. And I work with youth during my day job. I have Big Blue and You, as I mentioned before, which is a nonprofit in Miami. We work directly with young leaders who are working toward, you know, protecting the ocean using art and science, but also through programming. A podcast that I host called The Genius Generation focuses on young people under the age of 18 who have either made a massive discovery, started a new business that's directly solving global issues. I get so much hope when I listen to these young people, the Gen Zers. I'm a millennial, but, you know, Gen Z, I truly believe they're going to come up with some of the greatest ideas that we're going to see in our lifetime. And it's just a matter of investing in them, giving them the tools that they need, the resource and access. And I think the sky is the limit. So just wanted to plug that in there, because if you need just a jump start of hope, definitely check out what some of our youth leaders are doing in the world right now.
That's wonderful. Well, I think right now it's a pretty good segue to closing out our Challenger lecture series. Hilary, yes. Tom, any last words from you guys?
Just to say thank you to you, Brad, for you know, the leadership that you've shown here in Newport, and also to 11th Hour Racing, obviously, for everything that they've done with the sport of sailing. I know that through the work that I've done with 11th Hour Racing, it's really brought. I really think it's changed the sailing industry worldwide, the impact that they've had. So I think it's been really fantastic. So I'm more hopeful for the future. Thank you, Danny, for doing a great job. It's great. Nice to be part of this panel with Senator Whitehouse as well. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. What a wonderful evening for Earth Week.
Yes, happy early Earth Day to everyone.
But we've been celebrating it all month.
All month, yes, definitely. Before everyone goes, we do have a trivia question that comes with a giveaway that is graciously provided by 11th Hour Racing. If you win this trivia question, you will get an 11th Hour Racing t-shirt. I know you want it. So let's pull up. I'm going to read out the question really quickly.
And make sure you type it in the chat. Type it in the chat. Yes. The first one who types in the chat, I'm monitoring the chat. So the first person who gets the right answer gets the t-shirt.
Yes,
go ahead,
we do. Okay, cool. I'm going back. Okay, great. How many solar panels are installed at Sail Newport Marine Education and Recreation Sailing Center?
Oh, not a
Put in
win.
your answers. Let's see who is going to get it. How much time should I give until we should wait till we actually get an answer? That's
I have to go
No.
outside and count because I kind of forgot.
oh my goodness. Let's see. Well, I think the first and closest guess. So maybe Emily, who's behind the scenes with us, can help us out with a name if she sees anything nearby.
It's all moving so fast.
It's moving too quickly. You all
I
are
need
quick
to
on
go
those
back.
keyboards.
All right, well, we'll cut it off there. The answer, there is the correct answer. Should we just go with?
Yeah, go with the correct answer.
All right, let me just make
think
sure
so.
no one else. Let me just make sure no one else. Oh my gosh.
You're gonna have to get another t-shirt.
Uh-oh,
Okay,
we lost
drum
Emily.
roll. Drum roll for Emily.
Emily, where'd you go?
Where'd you go, Emily?
I think we lost Emily, but
We lost Emily.
We're recording this, and so the chat will be recorded.
Her
as well,
computer
right, Brad?
died. So
Oh no.
just texted
That's why
me.
she's like, oh my
So-
gosh. Okay.
Hang on.
I believe that when you record a Zoom, you're able to keep the chat. So
Okay.
you can probably
I have-
reference the winner.
It is, yes, thank you, Hilary. It is 75. So we have the winners.
Great.
So now we get to go back to 11th hour racing and get more t-shirts. So Hilary, I'm putting you on the spot.
I'll see how many I can come up with. The
Okay,
office
we
is
have
pretty empty
we
these
have,
days, so.
at least 2 winners. So we'll be putting you in touch.
All right, thank you.
Hey,
Oh my
so
goodness.
I just want to thank Danny, taking the time to do this with us today was an extraordinary, effort. And thank you so much for bringing so many great topics into our little world of sailing. Hilary, thank you for everything you do with 11th Hour Racing and your whole team. Tommy, thanks for being here, a URI grad and somebody who's out in Bermuda showing these Australians how to sail, apparently. But I really enjoyed this. I had a blast with the senator. And one thing that I just wanted to reinforce, when we take people on the water, for whether it's somebody who lives around the water or somebody from the middle of this country, we are showcasing an environment that is foreign to so many people. And the situational awareness, the respect for the environment that we as people who introduce sailing to people, it is a very big part of what we do on a day in and day out process. So I'd like to thank all of our staff, our board members, our members of Sail Newport for really working hard to showcase this marine environment to a whole new generation of sailors. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you very much. Danny, any last words?
Just gratitude. Thank you for including me here in this space. This was a pleasure to be here to learn. I'm still, again, learning more and more about sailing and all the good things, and I can't wait to get back on the water with you all at some point in the near future. So thank you to everybody who joined us tonight.
On behalf of Danny and Hilary and Tom and Sheldon, I'm Brad Reed from a beautiful Brenton Cove with the sun setting. Thank you for being with us tonight, and we'll see you on the water.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks, guys.